Hey, Jordan, we are live on YouTube and live on eScribe as well.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon. It is 1:15 and I will call the Land Use and Planning Committee to order. Today is Wednesday, March 3rd, and we continue to meet virtually using the Zoom platform. If you're watching this meeting on MCAT or on YouTube or on any of our streaming services, you can find the meeting agenda at ci.missoula.mt.us/webcasts. And on the meeting agenda, there's a link to join the Zoom meeting. If you're joining the meeting within Zoom, you can provide public comment by using the hand raise feature. You can also, if you're participating by phone, it does look like we have a phone participant. If you're participating by phone, you can press *9 on your phone to raise your hand. You can also call and leave a voicemail at 552-6012. So we just have one regular agenda item and a couple of administrative tasks first. Our first item is roll call. Looks like Anderson is not present. Becerra, Contos, Harp, Hess, Jones, Merritt are all present. Ramos is absent. Cheryl is present. Vasika is absent. And Van Lossberg and West are both absent. I know we do have a few scheduling conflicts, so we may have a few people filtering in as the meeting goes on. We have minutes from both February 10th and February 17th. Are there any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, those will be approved. Okay, is there any public comment on items not listed on our agenda? Okay, seeing none. I think what I'm going to do actually is start. We do have a few members of the public, and we have 2 hours here for the McNett Flats annexation and zoning and major subdivision. I'm going to call for public comment now, and then we'll cycle back. So there will be another opportunity as well. But I just wanted to see if anyone wanted to make any comments at the outset of the meeting. Okay. Seeing none at this time, I'll keep watching for that. So I want to turn it over to Dave DeGrandpre for maybe a little bit of an update. And just as a recap, we've returned this item to committee after the developer's representative submitted a request last week or on Monday for a 1-week extension to the subdivision review timeline in order for them to present their proposal, their modified proposal for Parkland dedication, and for council and the public to have adequate time to review that proposal. So I suspect we'll be spending most of our time on that today, but since we've last met as a committee, we have a staff memo from Dave DeGrandpre. We have some additional public comment that we've received, and we've had some additional committee members who have asked questions. So like I said, I think we'll primarily spend our time on the topic of Parkland dedication, but this is a time also to get any other questions answered and to follow up on any other issues that are outstanding. So Dave, can I turn it over to you for a general update, and then we can invite the team from the applicant team to present their materials for their updated Parkland dedication proposal, and we can go from there.
That sounds good. Thank you, Jordan. Good afternoon, councilors. So with regard to Parkland dedication, we've had quite a few discussions, gone in some different directions, but I just kind of want to maybe just provide a little context or set the stage for the discussion. There's a condition, the developer is required based on the size of the lots to dedicate land or cash in lieu of land or a combination totaling 3.07 acres. So that's kind of our starting point. And this is under the subdivision law and our subdivision regulations. So the condition of approval that was recommended by staff in consultation with Parks and Rec and also Development Services current planning staff says that the applicant shall meet the dedication by providing 1.46 acres of parkland. And the idea was that this land would go just to the north, kind of run along the trail on the east side of George Elmer. So it would be a pretty significant size, be over 100 feet wide. It would be on lots 4 and 5, just north of the trail. The developer would also provide 0.56 acres for trail easement, and then the other half of the parkland dedication requirement, which is 1.46 acres, would be cash in lieu of parkland. And so the developer we had, I guess a week ago, we had at this meeting, we had a discussion, and it was brought up, or maybe it was at the public hearing, that the council said, you know, we'd really like to see something more than that. We'd like to see some usable parkland on some of these lots, particularly if there is going to be developments of multifamily type housing. So we passed that on to the developer. The developer was aware of that. We asked for a proposal of sorts, and the developer responded by offering to provide cash in lieu equal to 2.51 acres, along with a 0.56 acre, essentially a 20-foot wide easement. And so this easement would run from Remington Road, which is at the west edge of the property, south along the southwest property boundary, then all the way across east, essentially to the east boundary of the property. So this would provide a trail easement. It would provide a buffer, 20-foot wide buffer along the northern edge. Actually, Emily, can you pull that up so that it's in front of everyone? I think it would make it a lot easier. I saw the hand, Mirta.
You read my mind.
Right. So this is the developer's proposal. So it's 20 feet wide, and you may recall it's not shown on this, but on the preliminary plat, there's a 10-foot wide pedestrian easement that would come right from that bend. Remington Flats is the southwestern road coming in from, or sorry, Remington Road is the southwestern road, and there was the trail easement that was supposed to, or it was planned, shown on the plat, is coming off that bend, the elbow there, and running down to the south. That wouldn't be necessary if this proposal were to go through. So this is the developer's proposal, but in addition to the trail easements across the property and cash, the developer has proposed to pay cash in lieu for the remainder of it. And in addition, the developer has said that if any of the lots are developed with multifamily, and so in this case, that means 10 or more units on the east side of George Elmer, that the applicant would meet the activity area requirements for multifamily housing. And so just to refresh your memory a little bit, activity area is required in now this is not subdivision law anymore, it's zoning law. And so this can get a little confusing, and I want to be careful about this. Activity area is required when you have multifamily of 10 or more units, and the developer is required to dedicate 20% of the land area. What that amounts to, though, there are different ways to do that. It can be through balconies, it can be through actually like parkland, or it's actually common area, but it's recreation area. It can be through community gardens. It can be through trails, things like that. And based on Neil Miner's calculations, looking at past activity areas, he found that it typically amounts to about 13% instead of 20%. The remainder, the additional 7, would be kind of balconies and patios and things like that. So this is a pretty attractive offer, in my opinion, because it goes over and above what the subdivision regulations require. They require cash or land equal to 3.07 acres. And then if multifamily, and so they would pay cash for all of that, they provide this easement, and then activity area would then be required if multifamily is developed. And so I think personally, I think it's a pretty generous offer because it's above and beyond what our regulations require. But we've been meeting kind of behind the scenes, Neil and Emily, Jordan and I, and talking about some other options maybe. And Neil, do you have a drawing? Are you able to put up the drawing of what you put together?
Okay, let me move everyone around now that it went to the other screen. So this is what we had kind of discussed to create that buffer or transition from the single family housing into what could be higher density by creating a 40-foot buffer instead of the 20-foot recommended along everywhere where it was adjacent to single family housing. And then when it had that alley adjacent to 44 Ranch, we go down to the 20-foot trail easement, similar to what the developer showed.
So I think that kind of sets the stage. Are there any questions or clarifications that councilors would like?
I do have some folks queuing up for questions. Let's do some clarifying questions, and then we'll have an opportunity for, let's start with that. And so we'll do Julie and then Stacy.
Okay, thanks. And I'm sorry if this is a dumb question, Dave, but when you say that the activity area is required when there's 10 or more units in multifamily, does that mean per lot? Or like if they build just one building that has 10 or more units? Can you help me understand that a little better?
Yes, not a dumb question at all. I had the same question too. It's for the lot itself. So for example, if lot 2 is developed, let's say there are 2 structures of 5 units each, the activity area requirement would kick in.
Okay, and then I have one quick follow-up of when I look at Neil's exhibit here, if I may, Jordan. So Neil, what is the significance of the 13% that you've indicated on this exhibit?
Thank you. I realized I left that out and we had sorry questions. So I think what Dave kind of mentioned, and going back to last Wednesday's committee meeting, there was a desire to have that activity area requirement if it is higher density, and our kind of meeting our original intent with our original condition was to supply parkland east of George Elmer. So the 13% kind of goes back to what I've seen in the last 6 or 7 multifamily developments as on-ground park or common area or activity area. Like Dave mentioned, that some of those are met with patios or balconies, and we couldn't really do that with subdivision parkland dedication. We can do that with courtyards and activity area, or courtyards and open space. So I think we could do that as part of subdivision regulation in the parkland dedication. And I got to that 13% that would be on the ground, if that makes sense.
Okay, so it's just maybe like an average of some recent developments that have been similarly situated?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
This, one more clarifying point, 13% is actually less than would be required under the subdivision regulations for each lot. The subdivision regulations in a multifamily type situation like this, it ends up being about 20% that would be required. So this is kind of a reduction so that we're not maybe taking over the lot and using that much of it for parkland or for common area. And one more piece is, I wouldn't want to design, there isn't a site plan we're told that there's not a site plan for these lots, or at least not a finalized one. And so I don't want us at the city to be designing where this parkland or common area would go. I'd rather have the developer do that if this is something you're going to go with. If you want to require something like this, basically just require that parkland be shown on the final plat. I think that's an option, but not for us to necessarily specify exactly where it needs to be.
Dave, that would basically, if we required parkland to be shown on the final plat, that would basically require a sense of where the parkland dedication would be on every lot at the time of the filing of that plat. And there would,
That's right.
If they were to want to change that, could they file an amended plat, or what would there be a process that would allow for that to change, or can you talk through what that would look like?
Boy, I've done it in other areas, in other jurisdictions. I've gone through amending plats that address conditions of approval, but I don't know the precedent here in the city of Missoula. I've got to think it can be done. If council can require a plat, and certain things to be shown on a plat, I would think they would have the authority to modify that as well.
Okay. Julie, do you have additional questions, or are you done for now? Okay. So Stacy and then Gwen next.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair. So I guess I appreciate the fact that we are seeing some description. I understand, for those of us who are visual learners, I really appreciate kind of understanding what that 13% may look like on a lot, say number 2. I guess I'm trying to track all the various options there seems to be on the table right now. Originally, when this came in front of us, there seemed to be some sort of, it was a hybrid of cash and lieu and then some dedicated space east of George Elmer, thinking that George Elmer was an impediment to try to address the fact that we need some sort of green space for the folks who will live if those lots end up being developed into family spots for them to go. So the developer originally just wanted to do all cash in lieu and not have to dedicate any land. So there was then this hybrid option. Now, and then there was a discussion of whether or not the easement required on lot number 6, because there is that one lot that actually abuts directly to it that's not separated by, I think it's Avon Road, that actually triggered the 20% easement, or 20-foot easement, sorry, that we discussed last week. Correct? And so I guess I'm concerned, my question is, what exactly is this particular offer getting us that we didn't, because the 20-foot easement was required because the house, and I can't, don't know what that lot number is, right there where your cursor is, actually adjacent, lot 38, because that touches, it has to, the 20% is already there. Now, is the developer offering up to give us an easement on that required 20-foot to then put the trail? And then what happens to the original hybrid cash and lieu option plus some land on George Elmer, east of George Elmer. I guess, is that one plan? And is the second option this option that in some places extends to 40 feet, and then we trigger the 20% activity space versus any sort of cash and lieu or park space? I guess I feel like there's multiple options here and not really following the thread on option A, option B, option C.
Okay. Option A is to go with the condition as it's written right now. That's condition number 22 in your staff report, which would have, it's basically half and half. It's half cash and lieu, half parkland, and the parkland would include the trail on the east side of George Elmer and additional area, totaling 1.46 acres. So that was staff's original recommendation. The planning board also affirmed that recommendation.
Got it.
Option B is to have the drawing that Emily showed. Emily, can you pull that up again, please?
I have it already, Emily.
Thank you, Neil. Yep, thanks.
So this is option B, and it's a 20-foot easement. There can be you could require that the trail be constructed. At George Elmer, there would be a rapid flashing beacon. That's part of the plan. So for pedestrian safety, because traffic will be pretty significant on George Elmer, it's going to be a collector. So that would be a safety feature. And the trail would be built essentially from, the southwest corner of the subdivision all the way across to the southeast corner of the subdivision. In addition, that's only 0.56 acres. You remember 3.07 acres is required. So the developer is proposing to then pay cash in lieu for the remainder. And in addition, so you're getting the trail, you're getting cash in lieu, and you're getting, in addition, if multifamily is built on the lots, on any lot east of George Elmer, that activity area be included.
And I'll just clarify one thing on Dave's request is we got to this trail easement west of George Elmer based on the planning board's additional condition, I think, to include separated bike lanes on Abbey Lane. So this separated bike facility or pedestrian facility would kind of accommodate that and allow reduced right-of-way dedication on Abbey Lane.
And then option C is the drawing that Neil showed a few minutes ago. It's a bit of a hybrid. And so this is just, we put this together just for discussion purposes, really. So this is not, we're not saying that this is set in stone or anything like that. We're trying to kind of, under the subdivision rules, again, you can require parkland or cash in lieu. And so we're trying to accommodate some different purposes here. With the Southern Trail, or the 40-foot wide portion, we're trying to provide a greater setback, a greater buffer to single family homes to the south. At the western side where it's narrower, there's an alley there anyway. So it would already be the setback would already be at least 40 feet wide. And then the two areas of green space that you see on lots 2 and 3 to the north, that has the potential to be dedicated parkland. And so we're just kind of providing an illustration as to what that might mean. We're certainly not trying to design that parkland for the subdivider, but we're trying to, accomplish a couple of different things. And the buffer, the trail, and also provide some dedicated common area on those lots.
Follow up.
Yeah, go ahead, Stacy.
Okay, I understand that the green squares are not on lots 2 and 3, just are meant to show a proportionality, not that there will be a pocket park on either one of those intersections, just kind of like overall space to, yeah, exactly. It can move around. I guess my question is, did the 20-foot easement on lot 6, that's already required because of the fact that one lot from the prior subdivision abuts that land?
Yeah, I think, so it's, sorry, Dave. It's a setback rather than an easement, but in any situation, that setback is required. And that setback is referring to where a building could be placed on that lot. So in all of those options, a building could be no closer to that southern boundary than 20 feet.
Great. I appreciate that clarification, because what the developer is offering is more in option 2 with the easement to put that trail there. It's not necessarily getting us any additional buffer space. It just is getting us the ability to put a trail there. That is the kind of, I'm having a hard time articulating that distinction, because I think it's, appreciate that the fact we can use the land, but it doesn't actually provide any more of a buffer. So with option C that Dave and Neil and you all have worked on, it actually increases the buffer a little bit on the southern parcel of the overall development through there, correct? And then provides for this activity space on a potential lot that may have multifamily. And so that is basically being used as the condition instead of dedicated parkland or cash in lieu. It's kind of like, I call it activity space as a different option versus like park, within subdivisions, you have to have parkland or cash in lieu.
I'd call it parkland. And this is another place where this gets pretty confusing is, we have subdivision law and we have zoning law.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't want to I want to try to keep them separate as much as we can, just from a legal defensibility standpoint and standpoint of clarity as well. So your subdivision regulations require a certain amount of parkland, cash in lieu, or a combination, 3.07 acres. And so, we can talk about it as though it's activity area, but this proposal is to use subdivision regulations as the mechanism to achieve that.
Appreciate that clarification of where we are drawing, from what part of law we are drawing this inferences. I will stop now. Thank you so much.
Okay, I have people in the queue. I want to go to the development team. They have their hand up, and I want to give them an opportunity to present their proposal and talk about it from their perspective. So I'm going to do that and then come back to the queue. What I have to just while we're on the topic of the setback, I want to ask a question about that 20-foot setback. So what could go in that space? Could parking or could certain functions other than building footprint go in that 20-foot space? If there's say there's no trail easement, just hypothetically, if there's just that 20-foot setback, are there any uses of the property that are permitted in that space beyond buffering landscape or other landscaping uses?
Yeah, so I wanted to make a point of clarification on that. So there is the 20-foot setback, and that was dictated by that one lot that's touching the parcel. But the 20-foot setback is specifically to buildings. So you can still put parking in the 20-foot setback. So if we didn't do the dedication of the trail, the parking could butt almost up against the alley there. So by dedicating the 20-foot easement, then nothing can go in that 20-foot, not even parking. It has to be a landscape buffer. So if there was parking that was designed along the southern layout of whatever it may be, it would be alley, and then it would be the 20-foot buffer, and then it would be parking. Whereas without the dedication of the trail, that could go alley directly into parking. Okay,
thanks, Spencer. So I know Spencer and Cody, I know you both had your hands up, and maybe I turn it over to you for a moment to talk about the proposal that you sent and the associated memo, and then we'll go back to council questions.
Yeah, I was just going to touch a little bit on our initial layout and what we'd sent on Monday, and I'm sorry that we got it to you guys so late. Our client was actually at a funeral in the morning, so we had some delay in being able to get together with him and get it to you guys after we received the information from staff on Saturday. I'm going to share my screen real quick just so that I'm kind of a visual talker, so bear with me for just a second here. So I should be sharing my screen with you now. If you guys can see it, it'd be great. So this is the exhibit that we sent, and our purpose for this 20-foot trail easement is twofold, right? We avoid having to put protected bike lanes along Abbey Lane. We feel that directing that bike traffic to the reflected beacon that we had already proposed at Pius and George Elmer allows a safer route for pedestrians to cross, whether they be on a bike or by foot. That 20-foot easement, like Spencer said, provides a buffer between the parking as well. So it's just there for the trail, for the public's benefit. And then, like was mentioned before, that the additional parkland dedication is going to be done through cash in lieu. So that's going to cover all of the parkland dedication that's required by subdivision would be through this 20-foot easement and cash in lieu for the remainder of it, which is roughly $230,000. Additionally, on top of that, and Dave mentioned this kind of at the beginning, as we're proposing the activity area on the east side, if anything gets developed as multifamily, for that livableness of the community, you know, to make it so that it's not just buildings and parking lots. I know that was a concern and it's something that we want to avoid. So that was our alternative to it. And the reason we're pushing for this and bringing these to you is because, as I've said before, we don't know exactly what's going to go on all the lots. We know lot 2 is probably going to be multifamily. They're working on layouts with that, with the architect. And if that is, then we can fit in activity area there. But say we end up selling lot 5 for commercial use or something, or it gets redeveloped for single family residential where they all have yards. Putting in that parkland requirement during the plat makes us dictate where that parkland's at. And dictating where that parkland's at when we really wanted to be flexible, and we've been open about wanting to be flexible to make these things work, it makes it difficult to say, well, this is exactly where I can fit 1.46 acres of parkland. And we thought of this, you know, it's going above and beyond what would typically be required of the subdivider. He's paying cash in lieu, and he's also providing activity area, because activity area in the multifamily projects is normally void when we go through a subdivision process after 2009, because they're saying that cash in lieu or a subdivision that actually dedicated parkland has already taken care of that open space requirement, and they don't need to do it through Title 20. Us providing that activity area is in addition to the parkland. So it's a little bit confusing, I know, and that's why we wanted the chance to be able to kind of describe it to you all, that it's not just cash in lieu and, you know, a 0.56 acre trail easement, but it also includes activity areas on those lots if they are to be developed as multifamily.
Thanks, Cody. I'll go back to the queue that I have, and if anyone has any questions for Cody or Spencer or for staff, we can get right into those. I've got Gwen first, and then Amber.
Thanks, Jordan, and thank you. Was it Mr. Voith? That was super helpful. Whoops. Nope, now I'm not muted. Okay, I'm on. Yeah, it's been a long day of meetings. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Voigt. That was super helpful, because that's exactly what I was trying to figure out, is if the multi-use activity space and the parkland requirement canceled each other out, basically, or if it was in addition to. And my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. de Grand Pre, is the multifamily activity space is additional on top of the required parkland space, correct?
Correct.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And if I've got a couple other questions, Jordan, that go in a different direction, if that's okay.
Sure.
Neil, maybe we can pull up your graphic that I think you had designed had the 40-foot easement. I think that's a really constructive approach to first of all, I like this idea of having this connector trail all the way from Remington Flats, basically going all the way across this over to the far east section of this development to create that corridor. And with the 40-foot width instead of a 20-foot width, I see that creating a better environment. Can you talk a little bit, Neil, about, first of all, I think this would be a great corridor for safe routes to school as kids are walking to Hellgate Elementary. Secondly, I see it being a great dog walking corridor, which neighbors would basically love to have dogs using this corridor instead of their front yard sometimes. But Neil, if it's 40 feet wide, with what is, in terms of Park's point of view on this, what would be a good design in terms of trail and trees? And to me, this creates a good buffer between these adjacent developments. But what, with 40 feet wide, what could it look like and what would the benefits be?
Thank you. It's funny that you say that because I did a little sketch yesterday. And so I just, I did this really quick while multitasking in another meeting, so don't tell anyone. Right now, as it's planned, there's about 8 feet of landscaped right-of-way still on that Pius Way. And then that 40 feet would give us about 48 feet of landscape area. And so you could do some bigger, class 2 trees, larger trees, a 10-foot wide shared use path, and then have a larger area. You could have benches. This could meander. It has some flexibility as a buffer. And just, this right now, I think it's 48 minus 10, so 38. And so it's about 16, 17 feet on each side of the path. But you could also push this over a little and have a larger green space buffer between like the residents, and same thing with the cars parked on Pius.
Thanks. And follow up, Jordan?
Go ahead, Gwen.
I think, could you speak a little bit more to, first of all, I always hear the term triangulation, and what does that mean in terms of tree planting? And would that be something that could be used here? And then what are the requirements in terms of landscaping? Like if I walk down this 10 years from now, what am I going to see? When I say trees today, is that going to translate into bushes? And what's required to go in, and how could that be handled? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So triangulation would be something, can you see the circles now?
Uh-huh.
So triangulation would be the street frontage trees would be about 30, 35 feet on center. And these opposite trees would be kind of a triangulation pattern.
Okay, got it.
And so you create this double row or alley of trees that you're walking through, and those kind of canopies kind of overlap. So it gets them the ability to kind of grow to overlap faster without having them touch like that. Does that make sense a little?
Yes, thanks. Thanks.
And then the trail, like that's kind of what I would propose. I think there's a street frontage requirement in zoning that would create the trees on the street frontage. I think we could also have the trees in the boulevard as required. And so we could work on that. In my proposal, I would advocate on moving this trail off of the 7 foot is a minimum boulevard size. So I'd go at least 12 feet since it's kind of above and beyond like a sidewalk. So I'd go like 12 feet of landscape buffer or landscape area with the boulevard trees, and then, like a trail, a 10-foot wide. I don't know if it's going to be thick enough. No, but a 10-foot wide trail in there, if that helps.
Thank you. Yeah, that does help. Appreciate it.
Okay, next I have Amber and then Mirta.
Okay, I just want to, since I don't know if we're voting on anything today, but obviously we're going to need to vote on Monday night. So I just want to, I hate to belabor this, but I want to make sure I know our options, that I'm really clear about what our options are. So A is what was originally proposed, kind of a half and half, and a trail east of George Elmer. B is the 20-foot path on the south side of the properties, running the whole length of the south side of the properties, plus cash in lieu of parkland, because that would only be 0.56. But also the agreement that there would be an activity area on any lot that has more than 10 housing units. Do I have that B right?
Multifamily. So it could
Multifamily,
be
that's
multifamily units, not just like 10 shared
Okay,
or
sorry,
single
okay.
family.
okay. So multifamily, and then C, which is basically this that's in front of us right now, is the 20-foot easement going into the 40-foot easement where it abuts to houses, plus activity areas on multifamily housing, but no cash in lieu. Is that correct?
Can I interject for a second here, Amber?
Yeah.
I would say that, so in the A, B, and C nomenclature, I think we should probably say, so A is the staff report. A is the official staff recommendation in the staff report. B is the developer proposal that we received that includes the memo and the things that you mentioned.
Yep.
C, I don't think is really C is kind of a working concept that would require some refinement by staff and by the development team. So this is not something that's been proposed or accepted by the development team, but it also is. So I just want to be clear that what we're calling C here is kind of a discussion draft that is probably not ready to be acted on without a little bit of work. Is that Neil or Dave? Did I characterize that correctly?
Yes.
I would agree. I think what we tried to do is, the original staff report is, I think it got to 1.46 acres. And when we were kind of looking at it yesterday, I mean, we got what is shown in green right here is 1.4. And so it's really close. It's just spread out a little more throughout the site. To the original staff condition, I guess.
Okay, Amber, go ahead.
Okay, so thanks. No, that helps. That was going to be my next question, is if the developer had weighed in on this possible scenario of C. But so then the movable green squares that we have, right? So that's the additional dedicated parkland that would potentially move, correct? Yeah.
It could be. Yes, that's an option. Yes, it could be.
Because there would be no cash in lieu in this possible scenario. Is that correct?
No, I'm sorry. I just have to interrupt because Amber keeps saying that they are still offering cash in lieu.
This is.
Sorry, go ahead, Amber.
But this is a possible scenario. So I don't think in C, it hasn't been vetted or anything has actually been offered because the developer hasn't vetted this, as I think that or it hasn't been discussed with the developer. So this is just a possible scenario. So I don't understand, I guess, in this possible scenario. First of all, I'd like to hear what the developer has to say about it, but I also, so what are the green squares dedicated parkland? They are, correct?
It's kind of theoretical dedicated parkland. The idea was to provide you with some context as to size.
Okay. So, I mean, this could be a movable, sorry, Jordan, may I have another?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I just really want to understand for Monday what our options are. So in this scenario that's sitting in front of us on our screens, there would be no cash in lieu, but because we would have the dedicated parkland and some green squares somewhere, but there would be the possibility also of amending this in some way that we basically take those squares out, but we still have the 40-foot buffer. So can you just answer what
So
I'm
that-
confused on this scenario.
That's partially correct. This is but the total Parkland dedication or cash in lieu needs to total an equivalent of 3.07 acres. So this is what's shown on the screen here illustratively is 1.4 acres. And then in this scenario, in this theoretical scenario, the rest would be cash in lieu. And
Okay, so I did not realize that this whole green area on the screen right now equals 1.4. I didn't have that written down. Okay.
okay, Spencer?
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of go back and I'll give you guys a little bit more of our reasoning behind this, our counter proposal. We listened to the comments that came out during the first LUP and the commission meeting and the input that we got from the public. And it was definitely a concern of the border against 44 Ranch and Flynn. And then again, the connectivity with the bike. So we felt like this was kind of a really good fit that helped accommodate both the concerns of the neighbors in 44 Ranch and the concerns about the bike path, the divided bike path along Abbey Lane. Again, like Cody said, felt it was good to kind of focus those bike paths onto the Tipperary Way Trail, which ultimately should be connecting through a larger part of this overall area out in the Sutup Cane, I think I got that right, master plan. So the other thing that seemed to be a concern, and we totally understand that the fear of the unknown of what is actually going to get developed out here, and guaranteeing that, not guaranteeing, but just wanting to know that some protections are in place, that the city will get a good development. And so what we kind of tried to do is what Title 20 had for multifamily developments in other areas of town where it didn't necessarily go through the subdivision process, but there was a requirement of open space. So what we're doing is, if you guys accept our proposal, is we are giving the city a mechanism to be protected in the enforcement of a certain amount of open space, so in the activity area. So if it does become multifamily, even though we're not showing you a site plan, we're agreeing that there needs to be that, and that the city still has the enforcement mechanism to require those upon building permit. So as the site plan gets refined, we work with staff to still meet those requirements. And it's very clearly defined in Title 20 as to what those can be. So people can go forward knowing that we are going to provide those open spaces. The other thing that kind of helps, and it was something that Councilwoman Merritt had a comment she had made previously about pushing a stroller and dragging a toddler. It is very difficult to travel distances, and I'm very familiar with that particular situation right now. And by doing the activity area, it's not that my toddler necessarily needs a 20-acre park to go play in. It just needs some kind of an outdoor space, and preferably close enough that there isn't two meltdowns on the way and back. So what we feel our proposal does is kind of creates that environment and gives a win-win. And then the third win we feel is we're still paying the cash. So we're still giving the $200,000 plus money to the city. Neil had shared previously in a conceptual master plan, and Neil and I had this conversation. It's still very conceptual about a future regional park slightly to the north, as was shown on Dover Cole's one of their preliminary plans. But again, very conceptual, but it gives the city the ability to have an additional fund to go just north of this development and buy a regional park. So we kind of feel like it's a win-win-win in the fact that we're addressing most of the concerns that people have. We're taking away some of the uncertainty as to what the open space would look like if it were multifamily. And then we're giving the city the ability with some additional cash to do a little bit more planning for a large regional park to the north.
Thanks. Amber, do you have additional questions?
I don't. Thank you.
Okay, next, Mirta and then Julie.
Thanks. I have a couple of questions, but I'll start with just some clarifications, because I think that scenario that we're looking at right now was intended to address some of the concerns, but in a way it has complicated a little bit what the options are right now, because the way, and correct me if I'm wrong, the way I understand that we have staff recommendations later to address some concerns. What we're looking at on the screen is what was proposed and not accepted by the developer. Instead, they came back with a counter offer, which is the easement and cash in lieu for the remainder of what they're required to provide as Parkland dedication. Is that right?
Just with one kind of slight modification. What you see on the screen here it's not necessarily a formal proposal. It's not something that staff really proposed. Neil drew it up in consultation with myself and Aaron Wilson and Jordan, just to try to address some of the concerns that council has expressed.
Yeah. Okay, so my question now is, if we were to go with something like what we're looking at on the screen, we would have to have a condition of approval that says if, those lots are to be developed as multifamily. Because if we want to allow for that flexibility that the developer wants, then we're tying them to providing Parkland dedication, even when one of those lots, say lot 3, comes back as a potential commercial use, correct? I'm not sure I asked you a question. I'm just trying to work this through in my head. But my question, though, is right now, if this develops, with the option that the developer presents to us, we can rely on our zoning on Title 20 to provide whatever requirements for parkland or buffer or landscaping are included in Title 20. What we're looking at right now is only based on our subdivision regulations, because we don't know what the developer will be putting on these lots, correct? So at the time that they come in with a proposal and a building permit, if it's commercial, our commercial regulations under Title 20 will apply. And if that requires landscaping and buffering, that will be required and expected. If it becomes multifamily, they will meet that requirement under Title 20, but it will only be based on those activity areas on the building. So balconies or whatnot, not a green space, because they're covering that through this cash in lieu and buffer that they're providing, correct?
No, that's not quite right.
Okay, no, they still have to provide a activity area of actual grass, green space.
Yes, so their counter proposal essentially is, so for lot 2, if multifamily is developed there and it's 10 or more units, that 20% of the lot would have to be activity area.
Okay. So what happens then if one of those lots becomes single family homes?
Then no activity area would be required. They would have met the Parkland dedication through cash in lieu.
Right. Okay. Okay, I do know that snow removal and storage has been one of the residents' concerns. And so I'm wondering if that 40-foot wide buffer could, alleviate some of the concerns for this neighborhood. Also 40 feet, just to have it in scale, it's about the size of George Elmer, the paved surface of George Elmer. Is that right? I just want us all to know what 40 feet of linear footage looks like.
I think that's roughly about right.
So, those houses on Flynn Ranch would have about the width of George Elmer, separating them from whatever uses are proposed for those lots. Just about.
Well, I think it's more than that. So Neil, can you scroll down a little bit? So on the west side, you can see the lots, 38. Well, I guess right there it would be lot 38 would be, yeah, slightly more than the width of George Elmer from their fence line to where a building could be located.
Right.
To west of that, lot 39, lot 40, lot 41, there's an alley there.
Yeah.
That provides some additional separation. Then over on the east side, there is Pius Way between those homes and the subject property.
Right, so it'd be Pius Way plus an additional 40 feet of separation between any proposed development on lot 5 and the current owners in Flynn Ranch. I'm sorry, yeah, Flynn Ranch. And one last question, how much is the cash in lieu? About 200,000?
I believe it was roughly 230,000 with our counter proposal that is not this one that's shown, but Neil, if you can go to the 21-0301.
Yeah, it would be based on the subdivision regulations that they'd have to supply a appraisal. And so based on the appraisal and the value of the land, it'd be whatever the remainder is. Like in their proposal, it'd be like 2.5 acres of cash in lieu. So it could be 230 to plus, depending on whatever this land costs out here with the new zoning.
Okay. Jordan, and just one quick final question. That appraisal is based on the land as it is now in the county or after it's annexed into the city?
As it's going to be developed. So it'll be in annexed city, the zoning that this land would be developed at.
Okay, thanks.
Cody, I saw that you had your hand up a minute ago. Did you want to add anything else?
Yeah, I was actually just going to touch on, our 20-foot buffer that we have shown here. You guys mentioned that we had the alley on the west side that separated them from the 44 ranch homes, but I wanted to point out that Pius Way was actually wider than the alley separating us from the Flynn Ranch homes. And it was kind of touched on, and that answers why I lowered my hand, but that's kind of important to what we thought when we presented this idea of that 20-foot buffer is a majority of these lots have either an alley or a right-of-way that is in addition to that 20-foot buffer that we had shown in our proposal.
Okay, thanks. Next in the queue is Julie, and then followed by Heidi.
Thanks, and I apologize for interrupting earlier. I guess I just want to clarify, if I've got it right, under any of these scenarios, there's going to be cash in lieu paid, and that the sum total between the land that's dedicated and the cash in lieu that's paid is always going to add up to the 3.07 acres. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. I had maybe a couple other different questions, if I may, Jordan.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I've noticed that both in the developer's presentation of this exhibit here and the one that Neil put together, what appears to have gone away is the little connector where Remington Way makes the 90-degree turn. We had on the south side, yeah. And that was part of breaking up that block length. So are we also doing away with that if we accept either this proposal from the developer, or we end up with something like what Neil had sketched out?
No, I don't think removing that easement would negate the block length, I guess, findings. The idea was to provide that little easement, the 10-foot wide easement was to break up the block a little bit. But it's not mandatory. It's not required in the regulations. It was kind of a mitigation, so to speak. That would no longer be there, but it also wouldn't be necessary to provide pedestrian access.
Okay, that makes sense. It kind of slipped off the pictures, and I wanted to make sure that that wasn't just slipping off the radar. And then my other question, it's been mentioned a couple times about the bike lane on Abbey Lane. So is there, if I understood correctly, what was decided at the planning board was that there would not be a separated bike lane on Abbey Lane, but that there still would be, it would just be on the street. Do I have that correct?
No.
No, it's just gone.
The planning board had so the developer asked for a variance for right-of-way width for Abbey. So Abbey is the east-west road running right down the middle. They wanted to have it 64 feet wide, the right-of-way, and no bike lanes included. The planning board kind of wrestled with that a little bit and ultimately recommended that the variance for Abbey be denied and that Abbey be developed with separated bike paths on both sides. So with this scenario here, the easement would provide the same function as a separated bike path. In fact, might be even a little safer because, as you'll recall, down at where it crosses George Elmer, there's supposed to be a more defined crossing there with a flashing beacon. So it'd probably be a safer situation actually than having two crossings, one on the north, one on the south side of George Elmer along Abbey. If I'm being clear.
Yeah, and I guess so is there going to be on-street bike lane on Abbey Lane under, if we were to accept this proposal from the developer?
I don't think there was a separated bike lane proposed. Cody, can you answer that?
Not separated one, but yeah, I guess maybe I'm thinking what I think of as separated bike lane is like what Higgins looks like downtown.
Yeah.
Maybe we're not talking the same thing.
Our proposal here with this new dedicated trail easement and constructing that 10-foot wide trail would eliminate all bike lanes on Abbey Lane and try and filter that traffic down to that new trail with the crossing beacon.
I guess I have concerns, I'll just say this, about not living up to our complete streets policy if we're not even going to put bike lanes on Abbey Lane, because people housing that fronts Abbey Lane, people on bikes still have to get somewhere from there and they should be protected. That's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Spencer, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Julie, I just wanted to follow up with you. So as part of, George Elmer will have divided bike lanes. So they will be completely separate from like not on-street bike lanes. So anybody that would be traveling east on Abbey would only have to go to that intersection of Abbey Lane and George Elmer before there is a completely divided bike lane. So the proposal for George Elmer is a pedestrian sidewalk and a divided bike lane. So you wouldn't have to travel very far along Abbey, either if you went west or east until you got to that bike lane. So if there was something that fronted on Abbey Lane, you could go left or right coming out of there and you would hit a bike lane in a very short period, a completely divided bike lane, not even an on-road bike lane.
Thanks. Julie, do you have additional questions?
No, it's just a lot. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Heidi.
All right, thank you. I have a couple questions. My first one was, I think I missed the percentage of what the activity area per lot would be on this developer proposal. Would that be the full 20% that's required in, I guess, under at time of building permit?
Under zoning, yeah. I think it would be the voluntary activity area for multifamilies on these 4 lots if they were developed as multifamily. And that would be 20%. And it'd be, and Cody or Spencer could correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be available to be met by patios, balconies, activity areas, gardens, like a pool or activity room inside of the apartment, any of those can act towards that activity area requirement in multifamily.
Is there a cap at what percentage of the activity area can be met by those, I guess what I'll call them internal structures for the lack of a better term?
No.
No. Okay. And then if some, and these are just more general questions, if there's a building that's mixed use, say it has a commercial component on the ground floor and then has a residential component on the second floor, does that residential make it multifamily? No.
No.
Okay, that I think that's a really interesting thing to consider. And then I guess, and this is just for my own personal clarity. So the way I was thinking of option C, which I realize is a working concept, was simply as like a illustration of what the staff recommendation could be, instead of it being a completely separate idea. Was I thinking about that incorrectly?
No, I think that's fair.
Okay. And then I get last question, and this is more has to do with like big scale, just like subdivision level. And I guess, is it common to plat a subdivision without defining where Parkland is during the plat process?
No, it's uncommon.
Okay. Thank you.
Julie.
I'm really sorry, but the answer that was just given to Heidi sounds like it was the opposite of what I was told. When I asked if vertical mixed use still require, if there was multifamily as part of that, still had to meet that 20%, I was told yes. Maybe I'm.
No, you're right. That was my interpretation. Emily, you have more experience with the zoning code than I. I was thinking that if there were 10 units in development, no matter whether it was a single use building or a multi-use building, that the activity area would apply. But you're saying that that's not the case?
Yeah, so activity area only applies when we can define the development as a multi-dwelling development. And the way we interpret it in zoning is if it's a mixed use building, it's neither just multi-dwelling or just commercial. So neither apply.
And I apologize to Julie. I must not have heard that question clearly, because yeah, I think that the mixed use is kind of, I believe it's this way because we've been trying to advocate for mixed use as a city. I think it's something that we probably need to address at some point in the future about that activity area and clean up in the zoning. But it's, yeah, as Emily says, it's if it's mixed use, it doesn't necessarily need that activity area.
I guess at the risk of complicating things, since this is a voluntary, or this would hypothetically be a voluntary application of those requirements, maybe it could be more flexible. I don't know how that would look, but
I think we would be willing to say if it is mixed use, we would apply that activity area to it anyway, because we know that we are offering something that's different and outside of what is regulated on us by the subdivision and parkland mechanism. So I think it would be fair that if we're proposing this to be that 20% activity area, that even if it is a mixed use, we would still provide that.
I think that would be great because we're actually, wanting to encourage mixed use.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want to take what you guys are encouraging us on and then get out of what I just proposed to you guys that we would do.
Yeah.
So that wasn't our intention at all. I was under the impression that a mixed use building would be a multifamily as well. So it's really no different to us. We can still propose that activity area with that.
That sounds good. That puts my mind at rest.
Spencer, did you want to weigh in on that too?
Yeah, Cody said exactly what was on my mind. He's 200 miles away and he's reading my mind. So it's perfect.
Sounds good. let's see, I've got Heidi back on the speaker queue. And
Except now I forgot what I was gonna say. So come back to me.
Sorry, Heidi, that's probably my fault. I talked out of turn.
okay. There's no one else on the list. I have a few observations, I guess. I think that the proposal that's on the screen here, what we're calling option B, the development team proposal, has some real strengths. It gets the trail easement over to Remington Flats. It sets the stage for the trail connecting over to Hellgate Elementary. I do think that there are a few things that are absent in this, and that are that we ought to try to address. I think that transition, and people have heard me say this like a broken record about every land use that abuts a different type of land use. I think that buffers and transitions and screenings and landscaping, all of those things allow for a transition that preserves livability and preserves quality of life. And my concern is that what we gain with trail is great, but we don't get the level of protections that the initial recommendations in the staff report provided for buffering and transitions. And I totally appreciate the idea that dedicating parkland on portions of lots where development plans are still in flux is a moving target. And so I appreciate the spirit of the memo committing to developing activity area in developments that come forward. I guess I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect though between some buffering in some very targeted areas, and those are north of Lot 38 in 44 Ranch, and those are north of houses that front Pius Road on Lot 5, and some of those right in that area. So Neil, can you go back to your working concept for a moment? And hypothetically, if this concept deletes the concept of the dedicated park area on lots 2 and 3, I guess it is, and maintains that wider buffer, I think that gets at some of the concerns of the buffering. And I think there's something about there's areas where we have these 40-foot linear parkways throughout the community, whether it's narrow sections of trail that abut other uses. I know the Milwaukee Trail along Dakota Street, just east of Russell, has a very similar concept, and it does serve as a nice buffer. So one of the problems with this sort of working concept C that's on the screen is that it conflates the parkland dedication within the lots and the linear trail and the linear park and the buffer zones. And so I wonder if the development team would comment on, hypothetically, let's remove these 2 blocks from lots 2 and 3, and end up with less than an acre of parkland dedication through a wider easement at targeted portions of lots 4, 5, and 6. And it, I think, also allows us to abandon the Abbey Lane conditions set by the planning board, in my opinion, and that frees up an extra 14,000 square feet that can be possibly applied to this buffer. So I wonder if the development team can comment on providing a 20-foot easement in places and a wider easement in targeted areas.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying. So forgive me if I get this wrong. So you're saying eliminate the parkland set aside on, say, lots 2 and 3 in exchange for the 40-foot right of way along portion of 6 and all of 5 and 4.
Basically, yeah. So more consistent with what Neil's got on the screen now, and I believe that ends up being around 39,000. It's less than an acre, 0.9 acres, I guess.
And then still meet the Title 20 on all of the lots east of George Elmer?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Well, I'd really love to say that I can tell you what the right answer is, but we are just the representative. I think I appreciate what you're saying about the buffer and the way that Neil had explained the triangulation, which is by the way, the first time I've ever heard that. So with like the triangulation of the trees, I would say that we're a fan of the triangulation of the trees to help create the buffer and maybe the additional plantings. I'll have to go back and talk to him and see what his thoughts are on the additional overall width. And it's something we can get back to you with, prior. We won't send it to you at 4:45 on Monday this time. We'll get it to you a little bit quicker, but I better not speak out of turn on this.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. I'm not trying to speak out of turn either, as something that the council would approve of. I'm just trying to I'm trying to issue spot things that might come up, when there is a final decision on Monday. So, but I think that buffer has been consistently something that members of the public have expressed interest in. So I'll leave it at that for now, I guess. Heidi,
I would go follow up on that just a little bit. I think a lot of people have a misconception of what it actually looks like. Our office is in an area where there's a lot of multifamily and people feel like it's looming down on them. And we have multifamily that's less than 40 feet away from our office. And I think maybe even if we showed some images of what it looks like, I think a lot of people drive by places that are considerably closer than we're showing and don't really notice how close it actually is in real life. I think if we showed you some places where there's buildings literally 1.5 feet off the sidewalk, and we're saying we're going to be 80 feet, away from the nearest house, I think a little bit is, as somebody said earlier, and I can't remember who, a lot of us are visual. And I think when you're looking at it from a plan view, sometimes it's difficult to fully understand what that looks like. So we may provide you some pictures or something that shows you ultimately how close that is. But again, I'll go back and talk to Mr. Tollefson, and then we'll be back on that end.
Okay. Thank you. Heidi and then Mirta.
Thanks. I did remember my question. It has to do just to make sure that I understand language correctly. When we're talking about dedicated parkland, does that actually end up being in public ownership when we say dedicated parkland versus, say, a common activity area, which obviously is usually under HOA management?
Not necessarily. Sometimes it's still kind of a easement or owner maintained or owner owned or like property management owned, but with a public access easement or common area. I think in subdivision regulations, it creates a courtyard of less than 5.5 acres. It's dedicated to the property owners association, I think is what it says in subdivision regulation. Sorry, I have like 3 monitors going. So I think there's also something in subdivision regulation that says anything under 2 acres is what we usually try to have the owner of the property maintain and own still. And it has either a public access easement over it, or it's maintained as common area for those residents.
And in that case, that would just be the land itself, it doesn't imply any sort of improvements to that land, right? So it's just the land, not a playground necessarily.
You're talking about for like the common area or courtyard?
Well, just any dedicated parkland area, that's just land. It doesn't speak at all to what the use or the function of it is.
I think I've always interpreted it as usable parkland, and so to get it to a usable state, or it mentions open space in area in there, so to get the open space to a usable state, I would assume there's some basic level of development that would occur, whether that's just grass and irrigation or trees. I would assume that to get it to a usable activity area, open space, courtyard, parkland, it would be to that level of development.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, I'm just trying to visualize what these look like and how they end up being maintained and used in the long run. All right, thank you.
Thanks. Mirta and then Amber.
Thanks. Jordan, thanks for bringing up the buffer proposal, I guess, if we want to call it that. I was just struggling with if and when to bring it up because, I feel that I've been struggling with this subdivision, zoning, and annexation because from the developer's perspective, I understand they want as much flexibility as possible, but that flexibility comes at a cost, and that cost is not being able to provide predictability for the neighbors. And I think that while giving that flexibility, it would be good to at least provide as much buffering from the unknown as possible. So I would really ask that you consider expanding that buffer to provide a little bit of that comfort of not knowing what's going to develop in the rest of the lots. Thanks.
Amber.
Yeah, I think actually I'm a visual person, but I'm also a list maker. And so as I was going the ABC, I also wrote a D, which was similar to what Jordan just said, as doing the wider buffer and then having the activity area if it's multifamily and then doing cash and lieu for whatever else is. So kind of a combo, I guess, between what B and C were. So I'm just voicing my support that that's something that I would be interested in hearing if it is something the developer is interested in as well.
Spencer.
Okay, I apologize, but I'm going to ask staff a question too to make sure that I fully understand your interpretation of what we proposed. So if we, we'll take lot 5, for example. If we go to the 40-foot, or we agree to the 40-foot width, does that 40-foot width count towards our area that would fall under Title 20 of the requirements if that were to go to multifamily?
Can I speak a little towards that first? I would say yes, and I would only say from my recommendation, I think that I would look towards the activity area to be up in 2 and 3, where we don't have some kind of activity area. Typically, these are an easement, so easements count as your property area and could be counted towards that landscaped area percentage is what I would assume. It meets all the 40-foot meets the minimum requirements for width and everything for activity area.
Okay. Yeah, I still think that if it was multifamily, in our opinion, let's say lot 5 was multifamily, I still think that there should be some beyond the strip. I'd like to see some other activity area in there beyond just a strip park. But if we pay cash, we do Title 20 and we do the dedication. I don't want to get kind of triple hit on that. So that was just my question of would that open space qualify? So I think you answered my question. Thank you.
Would anyone in the audience like to comment at this time? And we'll come back to that again as well. Ms. Ortega, I believe you should be able to unmute. There you go.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Thanks. I like the idea of a buffer, a larger buffer, and I understand that might be difficult because of the term that keeps being used as 10 multifamily units, and taking that land, the little park thing from, like, say lot 2 and applying it down there. Does that mean that lot 6 would then become the multifamily? And to me, the multifamily kind of softens the term of 3-story apartment buildings. And, you know, I'm visual too, but also when you have tall buildings and it's summer and people have their windows open, it also increases noises if they're in your backyard and you've got your windows open. I mean, we live, our homes where I live in Flynn Ranch, our homes are pretty close together. And when people have their windows open, really there's no private conversations. And I realize that this is not quite the same situation, but I hope you understand what I'm saying. I also, one of our big concerns is, and I think at the last meeting, and I'm not sure if it was Spencer or Cody, who thought that perhaps it was just going to be lot 2 that would be multifamily, but it sounds like as it's being looked at from the developer's viewpoint, it's still open to completely fill this with multifamily units. Is that correct, or am I off base?
So the zoning that's proposed here allows that. It allows, you know, all of the ranges of uses that are in that. I don't want to speak for the developer about their intentions, but the zoning that the council is considering allows the whole range of uses that are in that B2 zone, which includes the multifamily.
Well, we also talked about trying to make this more in line with what the other subdivisions in the neighborhood are going to be, as opposed to, again, changing the livability in this area by filling these lots with 3-story apartments. And we know, and I know that this was Tolfason's original, his son told me that they were all going to be apartments last April. I mean, I'm hoping that the council hears us, how that affects the livability and the quality of life in this area. And I'm not putting down apartment dwellers at all. And I know that Missoula needs more apartments, but often these apartments, the cost of rent is as much as a mortgage. So it's, I don't want to belabor this, but it's just something that I hope continues to be discussed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the audience care to provide comment right now? Okay, we'll come back to that again. Are there additional council questions or comments right now? Oh, we've got, I think we've got one. John, did you want to comment? I might have missed you. I'm sorry. John, you should be able to comment now if you want to, if you intended to.
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was Mr. Hancock, John Hancock. Okay, well, we'll come back if that is the case. Okay. Are there additional questions or comments from the committee members? Okay. Dave, can you walk us through process and timeline as far as, I mean, I guess maybe just confirm that we have a 1 week extension from today, which was our original deadline under the subdivision requirements. So this is before council for final action on Monday, March 8th. And is there anything is there anything else that you'd like to add, I guess, about process moving forward from here?
Just a quick reminder on process, and that is, the first step will be to have a motion for annexation and zoning. And so if the annexation fails, then you can't really decide the subdivision. It's outside of your jurisdiction at that point. You probably have to make a motion and just to deny the subdivision, stating that it's outside of your jurisdiction. We have received, and the way the motion's written, the first motion, it's a combination of annexation and zoning. And the zoning is B2-2. So we're looking for a staff recommended that council approve the annexation and zone the property B2-2. And then, but you need 2/3. If that's one motion that you're making, then you need 2/3 of the present and voting members to support that, to vote for it, in other words, because more than 25% of the property owners within 150 feet submitted protests. So that's the first step. Assuming, or if that is approved, if council approves the annexation and zoning, then we should move on to the variances. And so they're detailed in your staff report as well. Please take a look at those individually before the meeting on Monday night. And then following the variances, then it's a decision on the preliminary plat application or the subdivision application. And so what I'll do is, in the meantime, Emily and I and Neil will be working with Voith Engineering to see if we can come to some sort of an agreement, or I can come up with another replacement, I should say, for condition number 22 to address the parkland issues as we've discussed them today. And I'll provide that to you as soon as I can.
Okay. Okay. All right. Seeing no additional comment and no Spencer.
Before we complete, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody. I know it's been kind of a moving target on this whole project, and we've been going back and forth, and we're trying to meet the concerns that everybody has, but just like staff, and it's been great to work with staff, is we are bound by certain state laws and certain requirements, and trying to find a solution that fits within all the parameters we're given. They've been great to work with, and hopefully we're getting closer to finding a solution that addresses everyone's concerns and ultimately, like we talked about with staff, protects the city. And I know you guys are concerned about the unknowns, and I apologize, we can't tell you what's happening, but hopefully we're providing something that protects the ultimate integrity of what the development is going to look like with the open space and everything. And I just wanted to follow up and say thank you for your time and your patience on this whole process. I know it's been a little bit longer than normal.
Thank you. Heather.
Yes, thanks for an opportunity to just say thank you for trying to find a win-win-win on this particular project. As you said, it has been a moving target, and we've had a number of consultants in the past not be so amenable to ideas, and so my gratitude is for being open-minded and trying to come up with some creative solutions as we try to tackle our affordable housing issue in Missoula. And I know anytime we work with new development, I know it affects the surrounding neighbors. But to the point of trying to bring more housing to this community, this is how we do it. And I appreciate you both coming in and presenting today.
Okay, we don't have any additional hands up. So I think we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting a little early. Again, same things apply as far as additional questions. Feel free to get those to me, and I'll funnel them to staff or provide those directly to staff, and we'll get them. We'll get answers before Monday. So thank you, everyone, for working. You're working on this. Thanks to everyone who attended the meeting and provided comment, and we will be adjourned.
Thank you all.